The wrong room, the right mistake. The city pulsed with its usual nighttime energy. Neon lights flickered, car horns blared in frustration, and laughter spilled from bars and restaurants onto the damp streets. Inside the lavish five-star Lexington Grand Hotel, a different kind of energy thrived. It was a place where the elite came to escape, celebrate, or hide. And tonight, Colin Ashford was doing all three. He stumbled through the grand hallways, his expensive dress shoes dragging along the plush carpet as he patted his pockets absent-mindedly. His suit jacket hung loosely off one shoulder, his shirt half unbuttoned, and his tie dangled like an afterthought. His sharp, chiseled features, usually the picture of effortless charm, were softened by intoxication, and his dark hair stuck up in disarray. He had drunk too much. Again. A celebration gone wrong, a business deal signed, a toast to his continued success. But none of it felt like a victory, because the truth gnawed at him like a parasite. He had no idea what he was celebrating anymore. Colin squinted at the room keycard clutched in his hand. 901. He grumbled under his breath as he fumbled to slot the key into the lock. The green light flashed, and the door clicked open. He pushed his way inside, kicking off his shoes and stumbling toward the king-sized bed without bothering to turn on the lights. The exhaustion was instant, heavy, and demanding. He collapsed onto the bed, barely noticing the warmth beside him before sleep swallowed him whole. A scream jolted him awake. Colin sat up, his heart hammering against his ribs as he was met with the furious glare of a woman standing at the edge of the bed. She was wrapped in a blanket, her dark hair tumbling over her shoulders, eyes sharp with a mixture of fear and outrage. "Who the hell are you?" she demanded, clutching the blanket tighter to her chest. Colin blinked at her, his mind still fogged with last night's indulgence. "What?" His voice was hoarse as he rubbed his temples, trying to piece together reality. "You're in my room, you creep," she snapped, pointing an accusing finger at him. He frowned. "No, I'm in my room. 901. He patted his pockets, searching for his phone. Where the hell was it? His head throbbed as he forced himself to focus. The woman's glare deepened. "You think I don't know what room I'm in? This is my room. I booked it 2 days ago." She gestured wildly. "How drunk do you have to be to end up in a stranger's bed?" Colin's stomach twisted. He was too groggy to argue, but he knew one thing. He didn't break into someone's room. "Let's just check the room number," he said, moving toward the nightstand. "Oh no, you don't." She snatched the hotel phone before he could reach it. "I'm calling security." Panic shot through him. "Wait, hold on. No need for that." He stumbled back, nearly knocking over a chair. The situation was spiraling. The last thing he needed was another scandal. His father had spent years building the Ashford name, and Colin had spent the last few trying not to ruin it. If the media got a hold of this, it would be a feeding frenzy. The woman stared at him, fury simmering behind her sharp gaze. "You broke into my room, and you think I should just let you leave?" "I didn't break in," Colin snapped, his patience wearing thin. "Look, 901, right? This has to be a mix-up." The sharp knock at the door made them both freeze. "Security," a deep voice called from the other side. Leona shot Colin a triumphant look. "See? Now you have to explain yourself." Colin muttered under his breath. "Perfect." Leona yanked open the door, revealing a burly hotel manager flanked by a security guard. The manager's brow furrowed as he took in the scene. The woman wrapped in a blanket, the disheveled man standing in the middle of the room. "What's going on here?" the manager asked, his voice calm but firm. "This man broke into my room," Leona declared, arms crossed. The security guard's hand drifted toward his belt. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you." "Whoa, whoa, whoa." Colin raised his hands in defense. "I didn't break in. I booked this room minus 901. I checked in last night." The manager held up a tablet, typing swiftly. After a moment, he cleared his throat. "It appears there's been a booking error." He glanced between them. Room 901 was double-booked by mistake. Leona's jaw dropped. Double-booked? Are you serious? Colin threw his hands in the air. See, told you it wasn't my fault. Leona turned to glare at him. Don't act like you're off the hook. You still didn't notice someone was already here. Colin exhaled sharply. I wasn't exactly paying attention, okay? I had a lot to drink. Leona rolled her eyes. Shocker. The manager stepped between them. I apologize for the mistake. Mr. Ashford, we can move you to another room immediately. Colin sighed. Fine. Just let me grab my stuff. As he turned toward the desk, his eyes landed on a folded piece of paper. It hadn't been there last night. His stomach knotted as he picked it up and unfolded it, his face darkening as he read the familiar handwriting. Leona noticed his change in expression. What's that? She asked, her irritation briefly giving way to curiosity. Colin's grip tightened on the note. His jaw clenched. It's from my sister. Leona frowned. Your sister? He nodded, his voice low. Yeah. And it looks like she planned this whole mess. Leona's eyes widened. What? Colin didn't respond. His mind was racing as he stared at the note. Whatever this was, it wasn't just some random mistake. And now he had to figure out why. A stranger's war and a sibling's game. Leona Rivera stood with her arms crossed, her frustration boiling over as she glared at the man who had stumbled into her life. Literally. Colin Ashford, disheveled, hungover, and apparently clueless, stood in the middle of her hotel room, gripping a crumpled note like it was some kind of riddle. This has to be some kind of joke, Leona muttered, rubbing her temples. Your sister planned this. Why? For what? Some kind of twisted prank. Colin's jaw tightened as he read the note again. His sister's familiar handwriting stared back at him, the words etched with deliberate intent. Colin, you've been a mess since Mom and Dad passed. It's time you confronted some truths. I thought you might need a little push. Room 900. And one should be interesting. Margot. His hands clenched. Damn it, Margot. Look, Colin finally said, exhaling. I don't know what my sister was thinking, but this isn't just some prank. She's up to something. Leona scoffed. Oh, wonderful. That makes me feel so much better. The hotel manager cleared his throat, looking between them like he wanted to be anywhere else. Mr. Ashford, we can arrange another room for you immediately. Colin barely heard him. His mind was a storm of thoughts, shifting between confusion and growing suspicion. His sister had orchestrated this. But why? What did she mean by confront some truths? Leona, however, was running out of patience. Fine, she snapped. You figure out whatever weird, rich person game your sister is playing. I don't have time for this. She turned toward the manager. And I want something free for this nightmare. Of course, Ms. Rivera, the manager stammered. Colin ran a hand through his hair, muttering under his breath. He had been ready to walk away, to get another room, to drink off the confusion. But something about this was off. Margot wasn't the type to play games without a reason. And as much as he hated to admit it, he was curious. If you're so eager to get rid of me, Colin said, lifting an eyebrow, why do you care what my sister's doing? Leona crossed her arms. Because your family's drama has dragged me into it. I deserve to know why. Colin stared at her for a moment before nodding. Fine. You want answers. So do I. He grabbed his blazer from the chair, straightened his stance, and looked her dead in the eye. Let's find out together. A drive of tension and truths. 20 minutes later, Leona found herself reluctantly stepping into the sleek, black luxury car that Colin had arranged. She would have rather left this mess behind, but something in her gut told her that walking away meant leaving unanswered questions behind. Colin slid into the driver's seat, gripping the wheel a little too tight. Leona scoffed. You look like you're about to have a breakdown. He sighed, his head leaning back against the seat. Oh, trust me, This is just another Tuesday in my family. Leona's fingers tapped against her armrest. So tell me, Colin, why exactly would your sister want us stuck in a hotel room together? Some kind of sick matchmaking? Or is she just really bored? He turned to her, his expression dark. Margot doesn't do random. If she set this up, it's because she thinks it's important. Great. Leona rolled her eyes. Important for who? Colin hesitated. That was the real question, wasn't it? After a moment he spoke, his voice quieter now. Margot and I. We don't talk much anymore. Not since my parents died. Something in Leona's expression shifted. You were close before. Not really, Colin admitted. But after they were gone, it was like everything between us just broke. She moved upstate. We barely see each other. Leona nodded slowly. And you think she suddenly decided to fix that by throwing us together? I think she wants me to deal with something, Colin said, gripping the wheel. But I have no idea what. Leona studied him. For the first time since meeting him, he looked genuinely lost. So where are we going? She asked. To see Margot, Colin said. She lives a few hours away. I figure if she's going to drop me into some mystery, she can damn well explain it. Leona smirked. Should be fun. Colin gave her a sideways glance. You don't have to come. Oh, but I do, she countered. I need to know why I woke up to a hungover millionaire intruder in my room. Colin sighed, pulling the car onto the highway. Fair enough. Secrets in upstate New York. By the time they reached Margot's house, a modest, well-kept home tucked in a quiet upstate town, the sun was already starting to set. Colin parked the car, exhaling sharply before getting out. Leona followed, taking in the sight of the woman standing on the porch. Margot Ashford. Tall, poised, with an air of effortless confidence, Margot had the kind of presence that commanded attention without a word. Her dark brown hair was pulled into a sleek bun, and her piercing blue eyes landed on them like she'd expected them all along. Colin. Her voice was calm, unreadable. He crossed his arms. Margot. She glanced at Leona, her lips twitching slightly. And you must be Leona Rivera. Leona blinked. Yeah. Margot's gaze was sharp, assessing. I suppose you're wondering why you were dragged into all this. Leona's jaw tightened. You could say that. Margot nodded. Come inside. The tension inside the house was suffocating. Margot sat on a pristine leather couch while Colin and Leona sat opposite her. Margot folded her hands. First, let me apologize for the unusual circumstances of your meeting. Leona scoffed. Unusual. That's a hell of an understatement. Margot sighed. I had my reasons. Colin's patience was wearing thin. Then get to the point. Margot studied them both. Then finally said, Leona, your father worked for our family, didn't he? Leona stiffened. Yeah, a long time ago. Why? Margot exhaled, her expression unreadable. Because I have something to tell you about him. Something you need to hear. Leona's stomach twisted. What the hell are you talking about? Margot hesitated, just for a second, but Colin saw it. And then she said it. Your father was accused of embezzling from our company. Leona froze. Margot continued. But he didn't do it. He was framed. The words slammed into Leona like a train. What? She breathed, barely able to form the word. Colin's heart pounded. What the hell was Margot saying? Margot's gaze didn't waver. Your father was innocent, Leona. But my father let him take the fall. Silence. Heavy. Crushing. Leona slowly shook her head. No, she whispered. That's a lie. Margot's face was unreadable. It's the truth. Leona's hands clenched. Years of pain, struggle, and whispered accusations flooded her mind. Colin swallowed hard. He had no idea what Margot was playing at. But one thing was clear. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about Leona. And the truth that had been buried for years was about to change everything. The lies that built a legacy. The silence in Margaret Ashford's pristine living room stretched between them like a chasm. Leona Rivera sat stiffly on the edge of the couch, her hands gripping the arms of the chair so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Her heart pounded, and she felt like the room was closing in on her. The words Margaret had just spoken refused to settle, as if her mind was rejecting them outright. Her father was framed. A lifetime of whispered rumors, of people giving her family pitying looks, of her father's weary, broken face. It all collided with this sudden revelation. And she wanted to scream. Colin sat beside her, his own expression unreadable. For once, the ever-composed, smugly confident millionaire seemed just as blindsided as she was. Finally, Leona found her voice. "Say that again." Margaret sighed, rubbing her temples. "Leona, say it again." Leona's voice was steel. "Say that my father was framed. Say that your family destroyed his life. Say that my family spent years drowning because your father decided mine was expendable." Margaret exhaled slowly. "My father had evidence that someone else, one of our executives, was skimming money from the company. But the scandal would have ruined our business, so when accusations started flying, he let your father take the fall." Leona's stomach churned. Her father, Ricardo Rivera, had been a good, honest man. He had come home late from work every night, his eyes tired but his smile warm. He had never let their struggling finances break him, even when the accusations started, when the whispers followed them through every neighborhood, every school, every grocery store. Her mother had stood by him, fought for him. But in the end, the truth had never come to light. And now, after years of carrying that shame, after watching her father die believing the world saw him as a thief, she was sitting across from the daughter of the man who had let it happen. Her breath came short. She felt like she might be sick. Colin was the first to speak, his voice low and sharp. "Why are you telling us this now, Margaret?" Margaret's blue eyes flickered to him. "Because it's time the truth came out." Leona let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "Oh, now it's time. Now, when my father is dead, when my family has already suffered everything your father took from us." Margaret flinched, but she didn't look away. "I know an apology means nothing to you, Leona, but I'm not just here to say sorry. I want to fix this. Fix it." Leona's voice was cold. "How exactly do you plan to fix 10 years of suffering?" Margaret hesitated. "I have proof. The documents that were hidden, the falsified reports. Everything that shows your father was innocent. I've had them for years, but I didn't have the courage to bring them forward." Leona's body tensed with rage. "Courage? You think this is about you needing courage? While my father spent his last years trying to clear his name, while my mother had to work 2 jobs just to keep food on the table, while we—" Her voice cracked, and she clenched her jaw so hard it hurt. Colin's fingers curled into fists at his sides. "You should have come forward the second you knew," he said darkly. Margaret lowered her gaze. "I know, and I'll never forgive myself for waiting this long. But I want to do the right thing now." Leona scoffed. "And I'm just supposed to believe you?" "No," Margaret admitted. "But I have no reason to lie. If you want to see the proof for yourself, I have it." Leona stared at her, her breathing uneven. Then, without another word, she stood. Colin looked up at her, wary. "Leona." She turned sharply. "Show me." Margaret hesitated. "Are you sure? This isn't just paperwork. This is the truth you've wanted for so long. But show me." Margaret gave a slow nod, then rose from her seat and led them down a hallway. Leona followed stiffly, her body locked with tension, while Colin walked beside her, his presence grounding even in its silence. Margaret opened the door to her home office, a sleek, modern space lined with towering bookshelves and a massive mahogany desk. She walked to a locked filing cabinet, pulled a key from her pocket, and opened the top drawer. From within, she retrieved a thick folder and set it down on the desk. Leona stared at it. Everything she had spent her life searching for was inside that folder. The proof that her father had been innocent. Her fingers shook as she reached for it. The truth buried in paper. Leona flipped through the documents, her eyes scanning every page. Bank statements, internal emails, ledger discrepancies, all pointing to a single name. Michael Harrington, a senior executive at the Ashford Corporation. It was all there. The money transfers he had disguised, the forged records that had been pinned on her father. A lump rose in her throat as she reached the final page. A letter written by Thomas Ashford himself. To whom it may concern. I failed a good man. I let fear and greed dictate my decisions, and an innocent man paid the price. I know this letter will not erase what I've done, but I can no longer carry this secret. Ricardo Rivera was not a thief. The real thief was Michael Harrington, and I let it happen. One day, I hope this letter finds the right hands. Thomas Ashford. Leona couldn't breathe. Her father's name, cleared. And yet, it wasn't fair. He should have been alive to see it. Tears blurred her vision, but she blinked them away. Her fingers curled around the paper, the rage and grief storming inside her like a hurricane. Margot's voice was quiet. Now you know. Leona swallowed hard, her voice hollow. I want this published. It will be, Margot said. I'll make sure the world knows. Leona's breath was uneven. This was what she had wanted for so long, but why did it feel so hollow? Colin reached out hesitantly. Leona, I need air. She turned and walked out of the office, her pulse thunderous in her ears. A fire that won't burn out. Colin found Leona outside, standing near the edge of Margot's property, staring at the horizon. She didn't turn when she spoke. Your father wrote that letter, Colin. He knew the truth. Colin swallowed thickly. I know. She finally faced him, her eyes burning with unspoken emotions. And he never sent it. Colin didn't have an answer for that. Leona shook her head. You don't understand. My father, he spent years trying to clear his name. We fought for every scrap of dignity. And your father had the truth the whole time. Colin exhaled. I can't defend what he did. Good, Leona snapped. Because I don't want an Ashford excuse. She turned to leave, but Colin called after her. What now, Leona? His voice was steady. Now that you have the proof. She hesitated, her fists clenched. I don't know. But I do know one thing. She turned back, her eyes fierce. I'm going to make sure my father's name is cleared. Colin met her gaze, something determined in his own. Then I'll help. Leona frowned. Why? Because Colin said simply, I want to make this right. Leona studied him, then finally gave a small, sharp nod. Then don't get in my way. And with that, the battle for justice began, unraveling the Ashford legacy. The next morning, Leona Rivera woke up feeling like she hadn't slept at all. Her body ached, her mind felt like it had been dragged through glass, and her chest was still heavy with the weight of truths she never asked for. She sat up in the small guest bedroom of Margot Ashford's house, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of the storm in her mind. The proof was right there, cold, undeniable evidence that her father had been framed, his name ruined to protect the Ashford Corporation. Her fingers curled into fists against the blanket. Her father had died fighting to clear his name. And all this time, the truth had been sitting in a locked drawer, untouched. She hated them, the Ashfords. Their power, their privilege, the ease with which they buried lives beneath their wealth. Her father's face flashed in her mind, his tired, proud smile, the way his shoulders had sagged under the weight of betrayal he never saw coming. Her heart clenched. Colin Ashford was downstairs, waiting. He had said he wanted to help, that he wanted to fix what his family had done. Leona didn't know if she believed him, but she did know one thing. She wasn't leaving without ensuring the entire world knew the truth. A deal with the devil. When Leona finally walked downstairs, she found Colin and Margot already sitting at the kitchen table. The scent of coffee filled the air, but she had no appetite. Colin looked up when she entered, his face unreadable. "Morning." Leona ignored him, turning to Margot. "We need to go public. Now." Margot sighed, setting down her mug. "I already told you I'm going to release the documents." "That's not enough," Leona snapped. "We're not just going to publish a few papers and hope the world listens. We need press conferences. We need a full-scale legal battle. I want my father's name on every headline in this country." Colin exhaled, rubbing his temples. "Leona, we have to be strategic." "Oh, we." Leona shot him a glare. "You don't get to say we." Colin held her gaze. "I meant what I said last night. I want to help." Leona scoffed. "You think I need your help?" "I think," Colin said slowly, "that if we want this to work, we need to do it right. Rushing in won't just clear your father's name. It'll start a war." Leona's jaw clenched. "Good. Let them come." Margot stood, smoothing her blouse. "She's not wrong, Colin. This won't be clean. The moment we release these documents, the board of directors is going to retaliate. They'll try to discredit everything." Leona's fingers twitched with impatience. "And what exactly do you suggest? We sit around and wait for them to decide how to spin it." Margot opened her laptop, turning it toward them. Leona's eyes flicked over the screen. An email chain. "I reached out to an investigative journalist I trust," Margot said. "She's willing to break the story if we give her an exclusive." Leona's heart pounded. "When?" Margot hesitated. "She wants to meet first. Today." Leona didn't hesitate. "Where?" Colin shifted in his seat. "Hold on." "No, you hold on," Leona snapped. "You had years to do the right thing, and you didn't. I've had one night, and I already have a plan. So if you're going to help, fine, but don't slow me down." Colin held her glare for a long moment. Then, to her surprise, he nodded. "Fine." Margot sighed. "Then let's go." A name that still holds power. The journalist, Monica Patel, was sharp-eyed, no-nonsense, and skeptical. Leona liked her immediately. They met in a small, quiet cafe on the outskirts of town. Monica sat across from them, tapping her pen against her notebook, her gaze moving between the Ashfords and Leona. "This is a big story," Monica said finally. "It's not just about clearing a man's name. It's about exposing one of the most powerful families in business." Leona leaned forward. "Exactly." Monica narrowed her eyes. "You do realize how many people are going to come after you if this goes public, right?" Leona didn't even blink. "They can try." Colin exhaled. "What Leona means is that we're prepared." Monica smirked. "You sure about that, Ashford? Because I have a feeling your board of directors is going to have a lot to say about this." Margot folded her arms. "The board isn't our problem." "Really?" Monica raised an eyebrow. "Because last I checked, the board was prepared to name you CEO after your father's passing. And now you're telling me you're willing to burn the whole house down." Margot didn't flinch. "Yes." Colin stiffened beside her. He hadn't fully processed what that meant before now. If Margot did this, if they truly went after the company, she would be exiled from the Ashford empire. She would lose everything. "Jesus," Colin muttered under his breath. Leona turned back to Monica. "Are you in or not?" Monica studied her for a long moment. Then, slowly, she smiled. "Oh, I'm in." The wolves start circling. The first article dropped the next day. The headline hit like a bomb. Ashford Corporation scandal. Ex-employee falsely accused of fraud. New evidence reveals cover-up. Within hours, social media exploded. News outlets began picking up the story. Reporters started digging into old records, into corporate connections, into everything that had been buried for years. And just like that, the wolves descended. Colin's phone rang nonstop. Board members, lawyers, investors, all demanding to know what the hell he had done. The first official statement from Ashford Corp came that afternoon. The Ashford Corporation strongly denies the claims presented in the recent article and will be pursuing legal action against those responsible for spreading misinformation. Leona slammed her fist against the table when she saw it. They're already spinning it. Margot exhaled. We knew they would. Leona's eyes burned. We need to fight harder. Colin's phone rang again. This time, he answered. Colin Ashford. A cold voice on the other end sent ice through his veins. Colin, the voice drawled. You've made a very dangerous mistake. Colin clenched his jaw. Who is this? A chuckle. Someone who cleans up messes like yours. Walk away now, or we'll bury you with the rest of them. Colin's grip tightened around his phone. I'd like to see you try. The line went dead. Leona watched him carefully. What? Colin set his phone down. His hands were steady, but his face was tense. They're not just fighting back, he said. They're going to war. The battle begins. Colin sat still for a moment, his mind processing the veiled threat that had just been delivered over the phone. His grip on the device tightened, his jaw clenching as his father's legacy loomed over him like a shadow. The Ashford name had always been synonymous with power, wealth, and influence, but now it was something else. A weapon, and he had just turned it against itself. Leona leaned in, her sharp eyes locked onto his. Tell me what they said. Colin exhaled, sliding his phone onto the table. It was a warning. He rubbed the back of his neck, tension stiffening his shoulders. They want me to walk away before things get worse. Leona let out a humorless laugh. Worse. Her voice was sharp, biting. What are they going to ruin your reputation? Call you a disgrace to your father's legacy? Boo-hoo, Colin. Welcome to my world. He met her glare, but this time there was no sarcasm, no smug retort on his lips. Leona, this isn't just about words. If the board is involved, they're going to do something. Retaliate. We just backed them into a corner, and powerful people don't like to be cornered. Margot sighed, pushing her laptop aside. He's right. If the board thinks we're a liability, they'll try to control the narrative, force us to stop. If that doesn't work, they'll discredit us completely. Leona crossed her arms, unmoved. Let them try. Colin studied her, the fire in her expression undeniable. He had spent his life around people who wielded money like a sword, who crushed their enemies with silent, calculated precision. Leona wasn't like that. She wasn't afraid of them. And somehow that scared him more than anything. Margot scrolled through her phone, her lips pressing into a tight line. They're already moving. Some media outlets are running counter-articles questioning your father's past. Leona, it's the classic play. They'll muddy the waters so people stop believing the truth. Leona scoffed, shaking her head. Of course they are. Colin's brows furrowed. Which outlets? Margot turned her screen toward him. A handful of business sites had released suspiciously well-timed articles, claiming that the allegations against Ricardo Rivera were still uncertain and that the new evidence presented was conveniently discovered. They're making him sound like a criminal all over again, Leona muttered, fury shaking her voice. Colin exhaled slowly. He knew exactly how this worked. Money talked, and the Ashford board had plenty of it. Journalists were already being paid off to manufacture doubt. Leona looked at him, her voice laced with bitter amusement. This is what your people do, right? Bury the truth under stacks of cash. Colin didn't react to the bite in her words. Instead, he leaned forward, his tone deadly serious. They want us on the defensive. We can't let that happen. Leona narrowed her eyes. Then what's the plan? Strike first. Strike hard. The conference room at Ashford Corporation headquarters was filled with sharks. Board members sat at the long glass table, some whispering, some checking their phones with carefully controlled expressions. At the head of the table sat Elliot Hastings, the acting CEO. a silver-haired businessman with ice in his veins and a reputation for getting rid of problems before they became problems. Colin knew what they saw when they looked at him: a disappointment, a thorn in their side, the last remaining Ashford son who refused to play by their rules. He smiled at them anyway. "Gentlemen," he said smoothly, taking his seat. "And ladies, of course." Elliot steepled his fingers. "Colin, we didn't expect to see you here." Colin leaned back. "Oh, you know me. Always full of surprises." Elliot's smile didn't reach his eyes. "You've made quite a mess." "Have I?" Colin feigned curiosity. "Because I was under the impression that the mess started 10 years ago, when an innocent man was framed to protect this company." A muscle twitched in Elliot's jaw. "Let's not rewrite history." Colin tilted his head. "History's already been rewritten once. I'm just putting the real version back in the hands of the public." One of the older board members, a woman named Jacqueline Turner, adjusted her glasses. "Colin, we understand that you have strong feelings about this, but attacking your own family's company is reckless." Colin's smile didn't waver. "See, that's where you're wrong. I'm not attacking the company. I'm attacking the people who covered up a crime. And that's not reckless. That's justice." A murmur ran through the room. Elliot exhaled slowly, shaking his head. "You don't understand what you're doing." "Oh, I understand perfectly," Colin shot back. "You want me to shut up, to pretend none of this happened. Maybe take a little vacation. Let things cool down." He leaned forward, his smile sharpening. "That's not happening." Elliot's expression darkened. "We'll fight you, Colin." Colin spread his hands. "By all means, try." Jacqueline's voice was level, but her words were razor-sharp. "You do realize that going to war with us means war with every powerful friend we have." Colin's gaze flickered toward the far end of the room, where a few corporate lawyers sat in silence, watching, waiting. Leona had been right about one thing. These people didn't just want to silence the truth. They wanted to erase it. He exhaled. "You can try to shut this down. You can throw lawsuits at us, buy out media channels, pull strings with politicians. I know exactly how this game works." He met Elliot's cold stare head-on. "But here's the thing." Colin's voice was calm, too calm. "I know every single skeleton this company has buried." The room went deathly silent. Margaret had been collecting documents for years. And Colin had access to everything. If they wanted war, he was prepared to burn them all down with him. Elliot's expression barely shifted, but Colin knew he had struck a nerve. The board wasn't invincible, and they knew it. Finally, Elliot sat back, folding his hands. "What do you want, Colin?" Colin's smile widened. Public acknowledgement that Ricardo Rivera was innocent, a full apology, financial restitution for his family, and your immediate resignation. Gasps filled the room. Elliot laughed. "You must be joking." "I never joke about justice," Colin replied. "But hey, if you'd rather see what happens when the entire truth gets dragged into court, we can do that too." The room was tense. No one moved. No one breathed. Elliot's gaze turned lethal. "You're playing a dangerous game." Colin stood, adjusting his suit jacket. "It's not a game." Then he turned and walked out, because he had just declared war. And there was no turning back. The price of truth. The boardroom of Ashford Corporation had been filled with men and women who had spent years controlling narratives, manipulating power, and silencing people like Leona Rivera's father. But today, they had met something they hadn't expected: a defector. Colin Ashford had just walked away from them, untouchable. But Leona knew better. No one in power stays untouchable forever. She watched him exit the glass-walled building from where she stood, waiting on the sidewalk. He strode toward her with the confidence of a man who had just started a war he knew he couldn't lose. "What happened?" she asked the moment he reached her. Colin exhaled sharply, glancing around as if the walls had ears. "They probably did." They're scared, he said simply. Leona's eyes narrowed. Good. Colin rubbed a hand over his jaw, tension still evident in the set of his shoulders. Not good enough. I gave them an ultimatum. Publicly clear your father's name, issue an apology, and provide restitution. Leona scoffed. And let me guess, they laughed you out of the room. Elliot Hastings laughed, Colin admitted. But the rest of them, not so much. Leona folded her arms, studying him. She still hadn't decided if Colin was just another Ashford brat playing hero, or if he actually meant all of this. The problem was, he kept proving her wrong. He wasn't just helping. He was burning every bridge he had to make this happen. She wanted to be grateful. But gratitude felt too easy when she had spent her life fighting without it. What now? She asked, voice colder than she intended. Colin glanced up at the towering glass windows above them. Now, he said, they either cave, or they come for us. Leona's stomach tightened. She knew exactly what kind of people she was up against. And the fact that Colin was using we instead of you made something stir inside her. Something dangerous. Something she didn't have time for. The first attack. It didn't take long for the Ashford board to retaliate. Less than 12 hours after Colin's confrontation, Leona's phone started blowing up. The articles were everywhere. Leona Rivera's family linked to past financial scandals, unreported debt, unpaid loans, and bankruptcy woes. Ricardo Rivera, not as innocent as they claim. Leona gritted her teeth as she scrolled through the articles, her blood boiling. Every headline was crafted to muddy the truth, to make the public doubt what they had exposed. Her phone buzzed with another call. It was her mother. Leona's stomach dropped. She answered, her voice tight. Mom. Leona. Her mother's voice was laced with panic. Have you seen what they're saying? They're dragging your father's name through the mud again. Leona closed her eyes. I know. They're calling him a liar, a fraud. This is exactly what we went through before. I can't do this again, Leja. Leona's grip on the phone tightened. This time is different. Her mother's voice cracked. Is it? Leona's throat burned. She knew why her mother was afraid. They had lived through this before. The whispers, the accusations, the ruined reputation. The difference was, this time, Leona was ready. I promise you, she said, voice steel, I won't let them do this to us again. When she hung up, Colin was watching her carefully. They're hitting back, he said, nodding toward her phone. No shit, Leona muttered, tossing it onto the table. They think if they smear us, no one will believe the truth. Colin frowned. They want you to back down. Leona's jaw clenched. Then they should have picked someone who knows how to lose. Colin's lips twitched into something that might have been admiration. A war on two fronts. Margot had been expecting them when they arrived at her house late that night. She was sitting at the dining table, a glass of whiskey in front of her, laptop open. The glow from the screen cast shadows on her face, making her look tired, or maybe just resigned. They're going after Leona's family, Colin said, dropping into the seat across from his sister. Margot didn't look surprised. I told you they would. Leona crossed her arms. Then let's hit them back harder. Margot glanced at her. How? Leona looked between them, waiting. When neither of them spoke, she slammed her hands onto the table. Are you kidding me? You're Ashfords. You have more skeletons in your family's closet than a damn cemetery. Colin gave her a look. We're aware. Margot sighed, rubbing her temple. You want to retaliate? No, Leona said darkly. I want to burn them. Silence. Then Margot reached into her drawer, pulling out a thick manila folder. You might like this, then. She tossed it onto the table. Leona flipped it open and immediately sucked in a breath. It wasn't just corporate scandals. It was criminal. Money laundering. Illegal donations. Offshore accounts. Proof of bribery, embezzlement, and federal crimes that would destroy every member of the Ashford board. Colin whistled lowly. Where the hell did you get this? Margot took a slow sip of whiskey. I have my ways. Leona's heart pounded. This was it. The nail in the coffin. We leaked this, she said. Every single word of it. Margot shook her head. Not yet. Leona scowled. What do you mean, not yet? Margot leaned forward. We give them a choice. They issue a statement clearing your father's name. They pay restitution. And they resign. Or this goes public. Leona stared at her. You want to cut a deal with the people who destroyed my family. Margot's voice was calm. I want to win, Leona. We send this to the media now, and they'll spend months fighting it. Legal teams, PR strategies, controlled leaks. It won't be a clean hit. Leona gritted her teeth. Colin exhaled. She's right. Leona turned her glare to him. Don't side with her right now, Ashford. Colin held up his hands. Look, I get it. You want justice. So do I. But we have to be smart. If we push them into a corner before they make the statement, they'll fight like hell. Leona hated that they were right. She wanted to hurt these people. She wanted them ruined. But more than that, she wanted her father's name cleared. She exhaled through her nose, barely containing her rage. Fine, but if they don't fold. Margot met her gaze. Then we finish what we started. A clock is set. The message was sent before dawn. Margot had contacted the board's legal team, delivering the ultimatum. They had 24 hours. 24 hours to clear Ricardo Rivera's name. 24 hours to own up to their sins. 24 hours to avoid total destruction. Colin stood next to Leona as the sun started to rise over the city skyline. Do you think they'll do it? She asked. Colin didn't look away from the horizon. They don't have a choice. Leona swallowed. If they back down, this war would be over. But if they fought back. She met Colin's gaze. Then we burn them, she whispered. And for the first time, he didn't disagree. The Ashford reckoning. The next 24 hours were a powder keg, and Leona Rivera was holding the match. She barely slept. Every second that passed felt like a countdown to war, and the battlefield stretched across headlines, boardrooms, and back-channel negotiations. Margot had delivered the ultimatum. Clear Ricardo Rivera's name, or be publicly dismantled. And now they were waiting for the Ashford Corporation to decide its own fate. Leona didn't trust them to do the right thing. She never had. And as she sat in Margot's sleek, minimalist office, staring at her phone like it was a ticking bomb, she prepared for the worst. Colin paced nearby, his frustration tangible. They should have responded by now, he muttered. His jaw was clenched so tightly she could see the muscle flexing beneath his skin. The board wouldn't sit on something this big unless they were scrambling. Margot sipped her coffee, her expression unreadable. They're playing out every possible move, trying to see if they can spin this. Leona scoffed. They can't spin federal crimes. Margot arched a brow. You'd be surprised. Leona's phone buzzed. She froze. A notification from a private number flashed on the screen. She didn't hesitate. She answered, her voice sharp. Rivera. A slow, measured voice came through. Miss Rivera. A pause. We need to talk. Leona's stomach tightened. She recognized the voice immediately. Elliot Hastings, the head of the Ashford board, the man who had laughed in Colin's face when he demanded justice. And now, he was calling her directly. She gave Colin a sharp look. He stopped pacing. Talk fast, she said coldly. A sigh. We're willing to discuss a resolution. Leona narrowed her eyes. They're cracking. But she wouldn't make this easy. No, she said flatly. You don't get to discuss a resolution. You have exactly one way out of this. The truth. Out in the open. Silence. The beat too long. Then Elliot's voice tightened. You think you've won. Leona's grip on the phone tightened. I know I have. Elliot exhaled sharply. You have no idea what kind of enemies you're making. Leona let out a low, humorless laugh. And you have no idea who you just pissed off. She hung up. The room was dead silent. Then Colin let out a slow breath. Jesus. Margot leaned forward. What did he say? Leona met her gaze. They're trying to buy time. Margot nodded. Then we don't give them any. No more secrets. The press conference was set. Leona hadn't wanted to play by the media's rules. But this had to be done in broad daylight. Margot had pulled strings, securing an event space big enough to hold every major journalist with a stake in business, law, and corporate ethics. Cameras were set up. Microphones were tested. Journalists whispered to one another, phones buzzing as newsrooms prepared for something big. And then, the Ashfords walked in. Colin stood beside Leona. Margot took a seat at the long table before the podium. Leona looked over the crowd, her pulse pounding. This was it. Colin leaned toward her, voice low. Are you ready? Leona squared her shoulders. I've been ready my whole damn life. She stepped up to the podium. The room fell silent. Then she spoke. My name is Leona Rivera. My father was Ricardo Rivera. And for 10 years, his name was dragged through the mud by this company. Her voice was steel. My father was framed for a crime he didn't commit. He was called a thief, a liar, a disgrace. He lost everything because men in suits decided his life was worth less than their stock prices. She let that hang in the air. Then she dropped the bomb. I have the proof. And today, the world will see it. A murmur ran through the room. Journalists leaned forward. Cameras clicked. Colin watched the Ashford legal team in the back. They were pale. Good. Leona lifted a folder. These are the official records proving that Ricardo Rivera was innocent. These are the emails, the bank transfers, and the evidence that the real criminal was protected by this company. Then she turned slightly. Margot stood and handed her the letter. A hush fell over the crowd. Leona's voice never wavered. And this. She lifted the letter, holding it up for everyone to see. This is the letter from Thomas Ashford himself, admitting his guilt. Gasps, whispers. The journalists had been waiting for this. Leona felt it, power shifting. Then she stepped back. Margot took the podium next. Her voice was calm but final. My name is Margot Ashford, she said, and I am here to tell you that my father was a coward. Dead silence. Margot's eyes flickered to Colin, then back to the room. My father let an innocent man suffer to protect his company, she continued. And today, I am here to undo that mistake. She took a deep breath. As of today, I am formally stepping down from the Ashford Corporation. I will not represent a company built on lies and corruption. More gasps. But Margot wasn't finished. The Ashford board has agreed to clear Ricardo Rivera's name publicly and legally. A full statement has been sent to the press. Leona's breath caught. They did it. They won. A name restored. The media exploded. Within hours, the news was everywhere. Ricardo Rivera officially cleared. Ashford Corporation confesses to years-old cover-up. Margot Ashford resigns amidst scandal. Colin Ashford breaks from family business. The cost of corporate lies. The story of a daughter's fight for justice. Leona watched it all unfold from the rooftop of her hotel that night. The skyline stretched before her, vast and unchanged, despite the fact that her world had just shifted forever. Footsteps approached. Colin. He stood beside her, hands in his pockets. You did it, he said quietly. Leona exhaled. We did it. Colin glanced at her. Do you believe that? Leona didn't answer right away. For years, she had thought winning meant revenge. But standing here, victorious, she realized something. Justice wasn't about destroying her enemies. It was about restoring the truth. I don't know what comes next, she admitted. Colin smirked slightly. That makes two of us. She turned to him. You really walked away from everything. Colin shrugged. some things aren't worth protecting. Leoma studied him, the privileged son of the man who ruined her father's life. And yet, he had burned his world down to make this right. For the first time, she let the anger go. "Where does that leave you?" she asked. Colin met her gaze. "I was hoping we could figure that out together." Leoma hesitated. Then she smiled, and for the first time in years, she felt free.